Hello, my name is LoG, and welcome to another edition of LoG Power-Ups. In today's power-up, we will be playing minor arpeggios with a variety of techniques, including using pick and fingers at the same time. Let's see what this power-up sounds like. This power-up will be split into parts 1, 2, and then the final part where we will run the entire thing along with a backing track that gradually increases tempo. Let's get started now with part 1. Okay, for this first part, all we're going to do is talk about the descending section. So if you heard the exercise, you can tell that it's just a shape that goes descending or kind of lower in pitch and then ascending higher in pitch, just back and forth. We're just going to talk about the descending part, which takes us from the high E string down to the low E string right there. So the concept behind this whole thing is based on small little 3-note chord shapes, or arpeggios if you want to think about it like that. And those chord shapes look like this. So the first one is this right here. This is kind of like a D minor chord, just the top 3 notes of it. And the notes in order that we're going to be playing are 5, flat 3, and then 1. That's the first one. Okay, so that's actually what we're going to be doing, just verbatim that, just walking down 5, flat 3, and then 1. Now we're not going to hold it like a chord, we're going to play it like a lead so the notes stand out individually. The next chord that we're going to do is the same exact idea, but all we're going to be doing is taking this 5, which is the highest note of the chord, and moving it down an octave, which puts it right here on the D string, while keeping the other 2 where they are. So this note, of course, just moves down to here. Notice the 5 was there, now it's here. That gives us the next little chord shape. The flat 3 and the 1 are still where they were, but the 5 is now down here. So we start with this one, 5, flat 3, 1, and then the next shape essentially becomes flat 3, 1, then 5. Notice the 5 is now the bottom note instead of the top one like the first shape. So again, that's the first one. Second one looks like this. Kind of looks like a little A minor chord, right? Still D minor. It's the same exact chord. The notes are just in a slightly different order. Flat 3, 1, and then 5. Then for the next one, it's going to be the same idea. Whatever the top note of this chord is, which is the flat 3 right here, we're going to move that down an octave, which puts it right here. So now the chord shape becomes this, right? The 1 and the 5 are still where they were, right? Those kind of stacked notes, except the flat 3 is now there. And I'm playing it with the pointer finger taking care of both the 1 and the 5, and then the flat 3 is with my middle finger. Like that. So let's play all 3 of those. First one, 5, flat 3, 1. Next one, the flat 3, 1, 5. Next one, the 1, 5, flat 3. Okay, and then the final one, we're taking the top note of this, which is 1, right here, and we're moving that down an octave, which is right there, while keeping the 5 and the flat 3. So that's going to be our next shape, looks like this. It's actually the same exact order as the very first one, 5, flat 3, 1. The last one, 5, flat 3, 1. So we're just kind of restarting, right? So we've got 5, flat 3, 1, then flat 3, 1, 5, then 1, 5, flat 3, and then 5, flat 3, 1. That's the whole thing. So these are actually pretty valuable for you to play just kind of how I just did it, instead of arpeggiating, just playing them like small little chords like this. They're really useful for a whole bunch of things. Chord melodies, playing leads, playing little chord shapes. They're super valuable. So anyway, what we're going to do here is pretty much just descend through those shapes, except we're going to add one little different note into most of those shapes. So the first one is verbatim this. That's all we're doing, right? Just walking 5, flat 3, 1. That's it. But the next one, which looks like this, that's the flat 3, 1, 5. Instead of just running that by itself, whatever the top note is, which is flat 3 in this case, we're going to add in the next note above that in the key. So that note will be here. That's the 4, right? So it becomes 4, flat 3, 1, 5. So it becomes like a little 4-note grouping. Whereas the first one was still a 3-note grouping. Just 3 notes, but then the next one adds in that extra high note. And the next one that we do is this. That's the 1, 5, flat 3. We're going to do the same thing there. Just add in an extra high note above the top note of the shape. In this case, it's 1 on top, so the next note in the key would be 2. right? So 2, 1, 5, flat 3. So let me play all of that. Normal, 5, flat 3, 1. Next one, we're adding in this 4 right here. So 4, flat 3, 1, 5. And then the next one, we're adding in the 2, 2, 1, 5, flat 3, right? Again, I'm rolling my finger from the 1 to the 5, like that. 2, 1, 5, flat 3. And then for the final one, which was this again, just the 5, flat 3, 1, kind of in order like that, with the 1 on the bottom. That's our top note, the 5. So we're adding in the flat 7 above that, which is 3 frets up from flat 5. If you're ever wondering, on guitar, on one string, flat 7 and 5 are always 3 frets apart. So if you think about that little shape, you're always playing 5 and flat 7. So pretty easy. So this one again, flat 7, 5, right? Flat 3, 1. Just working down like that. Now we end it like this. There's our 1, and when we hit it, we go 1, flat 7 real fast, and then hit the 1 again, hold it. Now for this part, that's all we're doing. We're not going to go back up. That's going to be for part 2. For part 1, we're just doing the descent, and that's it. So let me play the whole thing a couple times so you can see what it's like. First one is just 3 notes coming down. Next one is the group of 4 with the added note on top. Next one is the group of 4 with the added note on top. Rolling my finger. Next note is the group of 4 with the added note on top, the flat 7. Hit the 1, flat 7, 1, and finish it. So that last one by itself sounds like this. Again. Kind of simple. Like a blues lick or something, right? So let me do the whole thing without talking. You can see what it sounds like. Do it one more time, a little slower. That's it. That's the whole figure. So what we're going to do in this exercise, along with this track, we're going to play that exact thing twice right where we did it, but then we're going to move up 2 whole steps. So we're now going to start there and do that once. It's literally the same exact fingering, same exact lick, just up 2 whole steps from where we just were. That sounds like this. It's the exact same thing, we're just starting here. We do that once, and then when we're done with that, we go back here and do it once here. So just back a whole step, right? It is verbatim the same thing, you don't have to change anything. And then when you're done with that, go back to the beginning, do the whole thing over again. So it's twice here. Hold it there, do it again, here we go. Hold it there. Now we're going to do it up 2 whole steps. Gets a little crammed up there, so you have to make sure your fingers are comfortable. Back a whole step once. Then you're done, back to the beginning. That's the whole entire thing. So that's what we're going to be doing over this track. Remember, 2 here, then 1 here, up 2 whole steps, back a whole step once, and then back to the beginning. It's the same shapes every single time. You're not changing anything. You're just changing where you're starting. So now let's talk a little bit about what I'm doing with the pick. There's a couple things you can do with this particular thing. Now, I know in the intro I talked about using pick and fingers. I'm not actually using pick and fingers at all for this part. The pick and fingers comes in for the next part that we're going to do in part 2. But this one is pretty much, I mean, you can probably already see what I'm doing. It's pretty straightforward. It's just using economy picking. So we've talked about economy picking before. I think in the last power up that I did, power up 4, where I was doing little chords, we talked about it there. So if you need a refresher on what we talked about, go check that one out. But just to kind of give you an idea of what's happening, this is what I am doing. For this group of 3, the first couple notes, I'm doing a downstroke and then 1 upstroke that takes care of the next 2 strings. So there's a 3-string group. I'm doing downstroke, then 1 upstroke, which flows into the next 2 notes. So you can see my hand. Downstroke, pick the next, and I'm already sitting on the G string ready to continue to pick the next one. So my hand will look like that. Personally, I think it's a lot more comfortable to start with a downstroke because that kind of signifies the beginning. It feels more comfortable for me. But if you want to start with an upstroke and have that upstroke handle all 3 strings, that's very, very common. Nothing wrong with that. I personally don't do that, but you can definitely do that and have success with it for sure. Instead of, I'm going to do the downstroke, so that's what you'll see me doing. Then for the rest, because all the other shapes have 4-note groupings instead of 3, I'm pretty much doing the same thing, except I'm going pick, then a pull off, and then the same little one upstroke that handles those two strings. But you can definitely do pick and then an upstroke that handles all 3 of the strings. That's also insanely common. For some reason, I like the idea of the pull off. I like how it sounds. So, but you don't have to do that. You can do whatever you'd like. So those 2 versions, the pick, pull off, then one upstroke that handles the next 2, or pick and then an upstroke that handles all 3 of those notes. And then the next one, of course, will be the same exact technique because it's still groups of 4 notes. Either pick, pull off, and then the upstroke to handle the 2, or pick and then upstroke handles all 3. It's up to you. Same thing for the last one. Now, what I'm doing for that last one, I'm doing pick, pull off as usual, upstroke, upstroke, that one upstroke that handles those 2. And then I think I'm doing like that. So I'll do that upstroke to play the 1, then a pull off, and then a downstroke to continue the next part where we start working back up. So that whole thing, if you watch my hand, looks like this. Like that. Let me do it with without pulling off. That would be this. Also definitely viable. Both of those are cool. You can kind of pick whichever one you want to do. Again, when we are doing this economy picking type thing, which is, some people will call it sweep picking, we are not resetting the pick every time. I'm not going like this, up, 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 right? That's literally 3 upstrokes. That's not what I'm doing. I'm doing 1 upstroke that flows through 3 strings, right? It's not pick, pick, pick. I'm not going pick, lift, reset, pick, lift, reset, pick. That's not what's happening. I'm going pick, immediately sitting on the next string ready to go, pick, immediately sitting on the next string ready to go. There is no upward motion. It's just a pick flowing through the strings. It's almost like you're strumming like this, because when we're strumming, we're not lifting up our hand before we hit the strings. We're just doing one motion that hits all the strings. The only difference is we're doing it a lot slower and a lot more controlled, right? So that's the idea. Same thing with the left hand. We don't want to hold the chord or hold the notes together like we're playing a chord, even though that does sound cool. That's not this particular exercise. We want to lift the fingers as though we are playing it like a lead or, with alternate picking or something like that. So that's pretty much this whole exercise. So let me play it one more time. Watch my right hand. Or without pulling off at all. Make sure I got my fingering correct. So that's what I'm doing there. Straight down those 3 fingers, then pinky, pointer, ring, middle. Then I'm grabbing my pinky here, pointer finger grabbing these 2 notes, rolling like that. Middle finger, pinky, pointer, middle, pinky. Yes. And play a little better. That's the whole phrase. So this particular track, remember, that's all we're going to do, just the descending part. Play it twice here, once there. So twice what feels like D minor, once what feels like F sharp minor, and then once what feels like E minor, and then we start the whole thing over again. This track is going to run 70 to 140, and we're going to hold 140 a little bit to make sure everything is what it needs to be. So hopefully you guys, practice this. If you need to get kind of the general shapes down first and kind of sync up the picking, you can do that and then start the track. That's totally cool. But if you are ready, maybe you've already watched this video and you're ready for the track, let's get started with it. Again, it's going to go from 70 to 140. All right, that does it for part 1. This part, of course, we learned the descending arpeggios using economy picking, and in part 2, we will learn the ascending arpeggio shapes using pick and fingers. If you guys enjoyed this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below, and I will see you guys in part 2.